Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Geopath Out of Home Office Hours. This is the 11th in our series on more and the development of the Geopath Insight Suite. And I'm Scott Fischetti, and today I'm again joined by Dylan Mabin, who's here right next to me. Hello. Hey. We're really excited that so many of you were able to join today. So we really are excited about this and excited to talk about hourly impression data that we have available. So a few things we want to go over and talk about today. So I want to talk about the benefits of hourly impressions, what we see as, why we're so excited about them, and then show the Seasonal Hourly Explorer beta tool. There's a few updates that were made to it since May. I want to make sure everybody's aware of them and knows how to use the tool. And then want to talk about how we can start to move and just give some inspiration on how you can start to use this data and move from just looking at the data to deriving real insights from it. Now, we've gotten a few questions on how to calculate impressions per ad play, so we wanted to do a little bit of session on that as well. So I'm going to cover a bunch of different things today, and as we go through, please feel free to reach out, ask questions. There's the question widget in the tool. We'll pause throughout and make sure we're trying to address everybody's questions in real time, or as much real time as possible. So just to jump into it, why does this matter? Why do we care, right? So as we go through this and you start to see how analyzing hourly audience impression patterns, it provides deeper insights into the markets, the formats, and even the neighborhoods best suited to delivering your specific audience at the times you're trying to reach them, right? So what does that mean, right? So when you have this understanding of these patterns of audience delivery, it ultimately will help us be better informed and recommending various inventory, various markets, or even just how that inventory is used, or even the messaging that is used on that inventory as well. So and really understanding these patterns helps with all of that. And then when you start to look at the individual panel level, really starting to understand is there a prime time for a particular type of message, or a peak season for a particular type of message, helps to really understand as we're planning as campaigns or messaging, etc. And as we go into the tool and as we look at the data, I do want to make sure everybody's aware that this data is beta data, right? And so it's intended for research and for non-commercial use at this point. This functionality, this level of granularity of hourly impression data by month, by day, by hour, will be available in the final tool when it's released in Q1 of 2018. But for now, it is for exploration purposes, and that's part of what we wanted to do today, right? We wanted to show you how you can use this data for exploration and to drive insights out of that. But first, I want to give you a walkthrough of the tool. And the key change from May, the key addition to the tool, is that now we can look at the data by day parts, and we'll show you that in just a second. So I want to go to the tool. So right here, you should see on your screen the website, our Geopath homepage, and I want to show you how to get there. So go all the way over here to Tools, and you'll see Seasonal Hourly Explorer Beta, and you'll come to a landing page that has a bunch of different things on it. So a little video tutorial that you can watch. I think it's about a 2 or 3 minute video that walks you through the tool, and then also a step-by-step user guide that you can download and have right next to you as you go through the tool. But you'll see hopefully today, as we go through it, that it's pretty straightforward once you're in the tool. So I've already logged in, but to log in, you would use your ADS credentials that you have registered with us. And if you don't have that, please reach out to us at geekout@geopath.org. That's geekout@geopath.org, and just ask us to set you up with your new ADS credentials if yours have expired or if you don't remember what they are, and we can do that for you. So you're brought to this first page, and 4 easy steps. You select the market, you select the panels you want to look at, and the time frame you want to look at, and then you can analyze the audience. So in the market, you can choose DMA, CBSA, county, and any custom market areas that you've set up in ADS. So for today, I'm going to just pick the Chicago CBSA. type that in. You see it has a drop-down menu and also autofills for you. Click Next. And now what's showing here is all of the inventory that we audit that's in our system for the Chicago CBSA. And there's several things you can do here. You can filter by operator. You can filter by media type if you only want to look at specific types of media, obviously. Or if you're looking at just a specific panel, that is, I know it says panel ID here, but that's essentially the Geopath ID. Or if you have more specific information from the media company on panel ID or structure ID. Or you can also, even if you want to look at a particular area, you can just type in the main artery or cross arteries. I'm going to search for Michigan Ave, and then pick a few different pieces of inventory for our example here. So I'll just randomly pick this one, and I can show you here. So you see there's a variety of different, and you could just scroll through and pick any piece of inventory you like. Let's see, this one looks good. Let me pick one more. It's always nice to have a few to look at. Let's see. Okay, so now that I've selected my inventory, I just click Next. And this is where you're brought to select a time frame. And you can see here, you can either click day parts or be very specific and select specific hours, combinations of the day. You can click on and off different days of the week or even different months of the year. And you can see that these just slide back and forth to do that. I always like to look at every hour of the day, every day of the week for the entire year. I think it's a nice place to start, and then you work backwards from that because you can see the most patterns in the full data set. So what you're seeing now is zooming in, and there's the 3 pieces of inventory you can see by the pins up on the top of the screen in the map. And the one that we're looking at is identified by the blue dot below it. And you can see that here's the pattern here. So the top screen is showing you by day of week the hourly pattern. And again, in just seeing the data here, you can start to immediately tell stories about this unique piece of inventory, right? Has a heavy morning commute, and then it's pretty steady throughout the day with that little bit of a bump in the afternoon. So you can definitely see that this is an area that has a heavy flow of audience throughout the entire day. What's below here is by month, all the impression delivery by month for this specific piece of inventory. And if there is pedestrian impressions available, if there are rather pedestrian impressions available, which given this location, I would assume there are, you can look at it by that or by vehicular. And again, see the slightly different pattern. And I think it's interesting here too, you can see that there's a bit of seasonality, especially to the pedestrian impressions, which makes sense given where it is, right? Because there's a lot of vacation travelers probably during the summer months, as well, maybe even October, or the Cubs in the playoffs, that where there'd be more traffic, more impression.
Yep.
So you can start to see patterns and even subtleties in the data of, whether there's some event happening over a period of time in a particular month, we'll start to have that level of granularity available to us in the data. So to look at the other pieces of inventory, you just toggle between. I'm going to switch back to all impressions. You toggle between using the backwards and forward buttons here. And again, you can see how all 3 have a slightly unique footprint, a unique impression footprint, so to speak. And you can print this off as well as download a CSV file of the data. And I want to open this up and show you what it is, because it's going to, I want to show you, I just saw that there are a couple of questions, so I'll get to them in 1 second. This is going to be important as we start to talk about how to analyze the data. So this is what downloads in the CSV file. And this is the type of data that we will use and have used to conduct the analysis for the rest of the session. So I just wanted to show you where it is, what it looks like, and show you how to get it. So I'm going to close that up. And then I want to go back just quickly and show you what the day part data looks like. So go to previous screen. And then you just can look at day parts. And what you'll see is the top chart has changed a little bit. not a little bit, but it's a lot. It's showing day parts now. So, and the key day parts: overnight from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., morning drive time, midday, afternoon drive, and evening drive time, or an evening hours. And again, functions the same. You can toggle between the different pieces of inventory as well. And I think it's interesting that these are all on Michigan Avenue, yet they all have a slightly different pattern and unique footprint. I think that's really compelling. Anything you want to add to this, Dylan?
Yep.
So there's a couple of questions. Can you paste in multiple panel ID numbers to look at the day hourly data for an entire package, or do you have to hand select them? So for now, you have to hand select them, and that's largely because this is a beta tool. And as we're developing the final tool that comes out, as I said earlier, in Q1 of 2018, you'll have increased features and functionality with that to be able to create packages and look at the data a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, you can, though, export all these locations and then put those together in an Excel document, put that in a pivot table, visualize those in your own charts. So that's one way to get about to that end.
Cool. And so one other question about, are all the formats that you measure available in the hourly, for the hourly impressions, including transit?
Yeah, for the time being, this is just roadside inventory. Right. We are working on our transit methodologies to be able to leverage the new data sets that we're getting from our City Labs partners. That's in progress. That should be rolling out in the next couple of months as well.
Cool. Great. Cool. So hopefully you see it's pretty straightforward to how to use this tool. If you ever have any questions, again, please reach out to us at geekout@geopath.org, and we're happy to help out, do this run through individually if needed. But now I want to jump to how we move from just looking at the data individually to deriving insights out of it. So we've done several different comparisons that we want to walk everybody through. For first, we looked at the highest level. So we looked at comparing different markets. So you can start to see what's the personality of different types of markets and how do the audiences behave throughout a particular day and particular week when you start to look at the data at this level. So we aggregated two markets that are larger markets, larger metro markets, and you start to see this pattern here. When you start to think of a larger metro market, you have that more narrow tendency to have that more narrow commute time in the mornings. You can see that reflected here with that higher bump in the AM hours as people are commuting, and then a slightly elongated throughout the rest of the day commuting pattern to home. And when you start to look at other markets and compare to other markets, so here's a second market. We compared market 2 to a third market, which is a little bit of a smaller market. And you see that that pattern is slightly different, right? You have more consistent audience delivery throughout the entire day with that little bump in the evening hours, right? And some of this is reflective of the market itself. It's also reflective of where the inventory may be located in that market as well. And so you start to really understand and see these patterns emerge in the data. It can, again, as I said earlier, start to make more informed recommendations on types of inventory, markets, as well as even messaging. So I also wanted to show different media format comparisons. So do different types of media skew to different times of day? And this is for one market, and this is all of the different inventory laddered up. So you can see on the right side the different types of inventory that were analyzed in this, that are available in this market and analyzed. So one thing I thought was interesting is if you look at this very top, the maroon bar, it's for receptacles, right? And you see this really high jump in the morning, and then it trails off. Again, very reflective of most likely a pedestrian commuting pattern where people are commuting, getting to their office, getting to their locations, where these receptacles are probably targeted and more densely populated in that area. And then you start to see as they go to meetings, as they start to commute home, run errands, etc., it starts to trail off throughout the day. But also, you also see a lot of the pattern of, let me see if my cursor can show that, but you see this kind of bimodal points of morning, and I'm looking specifically, it might be a little hard to see, I apologize, but this digital bulletin pattern where there's a peak in the morning and then a peak in the afternoon, again, reflective of probably a particular type of commuting pattern, potentially with the more vehicular type of commuting pattern. And then looking at a second market, you can again just see, as we talked about earlier, there was that metro, that larger metropolitan pattern, and you see this is reflective of that. And also you look on the right side with all the different types of media in this market, you start to get a sense that this is an intense, larger market with a lot of, you can also see a lot of digital inventory as well. And again, and it's not to say that one particular type of inventory is delivering more impressions. It's just how that audience is delivered. It's showing how that audience is delivered throughout the day. And even still, not that this is, more audience in the morning and evening, right? It's just more of a sense of like, if you look at that kind of midpoint at noon, that there is that condensed peak in the morning where people are commuting in, and then the other, throughout the afternoon hours, people commuting home and going to meetings, running errands, going out to dinner. So you start to see that trail off with some bumps into the 5, 6 o'clock hour or so. Anything else you want to add to that, Bill? No? Okay, cool. Just a couple more examples I want to show. And again, I want to pause to see if there's any questions before I jump on to another. I think there was one more. Let me see. Can you break out this data not only by hour, but also by demographic? For now, this data is just 18 plus. In the future, again, as we develop the new platform, we will be able to break the data down into more finer demographics, as well as other aspects like behavior characteristics, et cetera, as well. So not right now, because this is the beta tool and the beta data, and again, for research purposes, to really start to think about the impressions in a new way than we've ever thought about before in terms of out of home. But thank you for the questions. Oh, let me get back to you. Okay, so then we wanted to pull out just types of media, so looking at bulletins versus digital bulletins, and you start to see how congestion is really influences how digital formats more than other formats. So here's the first market that we're looking at, so digital bulletins versus static bulletins in blue. And you can see they have a very similar pattern, but the digital bulletins are much more sensitive to congestion. So as traffic starts to build, people are in traffic and driving slower and are able to see more flips of any particular ad, and then you start to see that there more impressions are delivered, that audience is delivered more in the morning hours than throughout the afternoon. And here's another market with just actually the opposite. So you start to see that this is a market that has more of an evening commute pattern, and again, that digital bulletin sensitivity to congestion and traffic patterns. And again, here's one with that bimodal kind of pattern with the heavy morning commute as well as the heavy evening commute as well. Next, we wanted to look at and show how even when you're in a particular market, how even just a particular neighborhood or an area also influences audience delivery as well. So for example, looking, if you're in New York or know New York in the East Village, you can see how different neighborhoods have these unique profiles. So East Village, somewhat residential, a lot of restaurants, a lot of student activity with NYU right there. And you can see a very consistent pattern throughout the daylight hours with a lot of activity throughout the day and a little bit into the early evening hours as well. But looking at the Lincoln Tunnel, a completely different pattern. Again, very commuting heavy, a lot of people getting out of town, and you start to see, in and out of town, so to speak, and you start to see that there's really two heavy commuting patterns, with most of the audience delivered in those 6 commuting hours in the morning as well as in the evening hours. And then even local patterns within a neighborhood or an area can reflect just extreme behavior. So this is an example of a federal center in Washington, D.C. And if you know that area, very heavy working area with mostly government buildings. There's not a whole lot to do other than commute into work, and after you leave, head home. And that's very reflective in these patterns, and especially reflective of the DC commuting area, where you see a ton of morning, really high peaks around 7, 8, 9 a.m. And then as people have gotten in early, and that very elongated commute home as people are trying to beat the traffic and get home. And then in Las Vegas Strip, again, a very unique area with heavy patterns, pretty consistent throughout the entire day, and even into the early evening hours. You can see that 12 a.m. to even like 3, 4 a.m., there's still a lot of people out and about, more so than some of the other examples that are shown. And even you can see there's that little bump at 2 a.m. when the bars close, where people are kind of leaving the bars, leaving the bar areas, and heading to their hotels or whatever they're doing afterwards. Oh, good question. Sorry. So I should have said that. So what is the horizontal lines? What do they mean? So those are just showing the market, the average for that market, correct, Bill?
That would just be, no, the red line is just if you were to divide the day into 24 equal parts, that would be the flat, even distribution.
Gotcha. Sorry about that. I should have mentioned that. Cool. I think that's all the questions. I was just checking. So what does this mean? Why is this great? Why are we excited about it? So when you're able to understand hourly impressions and that level of granularity, you can again start to understand what is reflected in the local market behavior, or as well as kind of within a particular type of inventory or even a specific neighborhood. And this, having a sense of this pattern and being able to see that pattern, helps build confidence in the accuracy of the measurement. But also, I think it's really important to really know the context of the audience exposure, and that really helps when you're trying to identify a specific media type or a neighborhood or even the markets themselves. So having that context, or even having the patterns help you understand the context of the audience exposure, really helps inform our decision-making process overall. And I'm just going to pause. It doesn't seem like there's any other questions before I hand it off to Dylan, who's going to talk about calculating impressions per play. Cool.
Great. Thanks, Scott. So one of the questions that we get a lot is, okay, wonderful, we have hourly impressions. This is really good, as Scott said, to help understand the context of when audiences are being exposed to out-of-home assets. But in the case of digital, there is, of course, a growing world of the transactional or programmatic systems. And a lot of these systems need to understand how many impressions are being delivered for any individual ad that is played throughout the campaign period. And so I just want to review real quick on how we're calculating digital impressions so that we can talk about when we break apart this average weekly number for a spot in a loop to the number of impressions generated for each ad play. So for example, like an 8-second ad played at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, how many impressions does that one ad play generate? And we'll be able to do that with this information. So of course we start off with the circulation, so the total number of vehicular audience or pedestrian audiences on a roadway. We understand the demographics from the trip information, where those individuals reside and the demographics of those home neighborhoods. And then of course, for every single piece of inventory and its orientation to those audiences and the paths of those audiences, we know how likely those pieces of inventory are to see. Same goes with digital inventory. So we know how long the dwell time is based upon how long it takes for the vehicles to pass by those signs. And then with that information, we also know how many ads out of a loop are able to be seen. So we don't necessarily assume that all ads in rotation can be seen by every single person. It might be 2 out of every 8 ads if there's 8 ads in the rotation, or 4, or in periods of heavy congestion, you might in fact have an opportunity to see all 8. So when we start calculating audience, we calculate it first at the structure level, and then dividing those impressions amongst all of those ads in the rotation. So every single ad in the rotation, or every spot, has an equal portion of the total impressions that are generated for the digital structure. You can think of it as pieces of a pie. And the more pieces of a pie, the smaller that each one of those pieces are. So if you had 10 ads in a loop, you would have 1/10 of the structure impressions for each one of those spots. For this example, we're going to have 8 spots in a loop. So we're going to use an example from the hourly impression online tool, and this is for a billboard on the Dan Ryan Expressway. This is a digital face, beautiful view of the city, lots of congestion, but no cars in the screenshot. Pretty cool stuff coming from Google Images. And when we look at the impression delivery by hour, you can see that we have these patterns. We have the morning and afternoon commuting patterns during the weekdays, Friday a little bit heavier than others, the weekend definitely a little bit lower, but this is an interstate road. A lot of people are going to be using this roadway regardless of what day it is of the week. This is a major thoroughfare, but Friday, of course, is definitely the most congested. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with this information, and we're going to calculate the impressions per ad play. So to get the number of impressions per play, we need to know the total number of impressions and the number of ads that were played during that period. So we're going to start by looking at the impressions for a spot for a week. So we'll take the number of spot impressions and multiply that by the number of ads in the rotation to get back to that whole pie, right, the structure impressions. So for this particular piece of inventory, we have 428,427 impressions per spot, 8 spots in rotation, 3,427,417 total weekly structure impressions. A lot of people seeing this board. Another piece of information we need is the number of plays. So we're going to hold on to the total structure impressions for a second, and then we're going to calculate this. So we have 2 things that we can use to calculate the number of plays during the period. We have the reporting period, which is, in this case, a week, and the ad length, which is 8 seconds. So in 1 week, how many 8-second ads plays? That's how we get our number of plays. So in a week, there are 4,800 seconds divided by 8 seconds, a total of 75,600 ad plays per week. So now we have number of plays and the number of impressions for the structure. So we can divide the total number of impressions by the number of plays, and we get our impressions per play. So 3.4 million and change, 75,000 plays equals about 45.3 impressions per play, which is pretty impressive because for an 8-second ad that's played on the Dan Ryan Expressway, average is about 45 individuals seeing that ad. Now, this is a 14 by 48 bulletin, so you can see it from about a quarter mile away during some periods of the week. Very, very high congestion, so a lot of very high dwell time as well. So a lot of factors coming into play. This is a very, very high audience for this board. So we can use that same method to calculate the impressions per ad play on average for the week, but we can also do that by every day of, or every hour of every day of the week as well. So that average 45.3 impressions per play, we can also calculate that. You can see that the minimum is early Friday morning, about 4 impressions per ad play. Still a lot of people on the road during the wee hours of the morning. This is, again, a very busy interstate. And the maximum, a total of 81.5 impressions per play, which is rather incredible to think of how congested in a quarter mile, how many people are in those cars waiting to move forward. A very captive audience being able to experience these messages on these out-of-home locations. So this is some pretty cool stuff, and this is the type of information that is going to be powering some of these digital transactional systems. So feel free to pull some data yourself and run through those exercises. So some of the key takeaways from this is that this is really going to help us understand the unique audience for every single ad play during any period of time. And we'll have this information. As you may know, we are going to be able to start off with the average weekly rating like we have today, but broken out into 168 hours for the week. But then we're also going to start seeing seasonal variation and then monthly variation. So we're going to be able to drill down to a very, very specific time period that's very relevant to the campaign, both for planning purposes and post-campaign purposes. And this granular impressions per ad play information is going to help put out-of-home digital ads in the same type of platforms where digital buying and selling is happening. And of course, we all know quite a bit of money going into the digital online marketplaces. So lots of fun stuff going on here. And let's see if we have any questions.
Yep, there was one question that came in while you were talking. So can you count impressions if you buy a roadblock like in Times Square? Let's say I buy a 1 hour block, how do those impressions get counted?
Yes, you would be able to do that as well. So for example, if you had a roadblock and you say had all of the different screens or a bunch of different screens that had the same ad during a period of time, you would look at sort of a vertical slice of the number of impressions that were generated on the screen during that period of time. So that's another application of hourly impressions. Is so if you are breaking up the day into different periods, you're doing roadblocks during the morning commute, afternoon commute, or whatever time that may be, you can use that information to calculate what the unique audience is for that period of time.
Then you would do this exercise for each piece in the roadblock and kind of ladder that up ultimately? Yeah,
you could do it for each individual location, and then this sort of exercise, because you also may have, exactly. You're selecting all the pieces of inventory and looking at that particular period of time when the roadblock was up and looking at the total audience delivered for those screens.
Okay. Great. One more question. So looks like we're using total impressions, backtracking to impressions per play or impressions per hour. How is Geopath gathering the total impressions to begin with?
Sure. So getting into the methods of how we calculate audience, we first, of course, need to know how many vehicles are on the road or how many pedestrians on the road. A lot of that information is coming from DOTs, which collect average traffic counts. It might be an average daily traffic count. And one of the big improvements that you're going to start seeing in the data that we're reporting is that we're also looking at the activity from movements from mobile devices to then marry with those traffic counts to interpret the hourly fluctuations. So it's not just one single data set that we're looking at now to understand how many people are on roadways or walking around or in transit systems. It's actually many different vantage points that we now can look at. So we're looking at mobile data, we're looking at speed data, we're looking at, I don't know, lots of different stuff coming together, from connected cars to handheld mobile devices. So a lot of different things are helping paint a clear picture rather than just looking at one DOT traffic count.
Great.
So hopefully that helps answer your question.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Awesome.
You can just pause for a minute as we're waiting. We hope, and as we're waiting for any other questions to come in, I want to say that this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel, as are the other webinars that we've done in this series of the development of more, as well as the Geopath Insight Suite. We're going to continue to do these throughout the development of the Insight Suite, and hopefully everyone will check back in again next month and see what we're going to talk about next. And I'm talking just to give people time to type in questions.
Running down the clock.
Yes, YouTube channel info. Just do a search on YouTube and Geopath, and you'll get right to our channel. But it doesn't seem like there's any other questions. Oh, we got one more. Yes, well, the data will be available in January 2018.
Some of this data is available right now. So if you are a Geopath member, if you have credentials, member in good standing, you can access this hourly information in our beta site. And then, yes, the new measurement system is currently under development, and some of those tools will be available in January of 2018 with the aforementioned demographic variation by hour of day and day of week as well. So you'll be able to see that the demographics of the commuters in the morning are different from the demographics of the commuters in the evening. So lots of really cool stuff coming out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that. Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. And it doesn't seem like there's any other questions, but again, if there are, feel free to reach out to us, as I said earlier. Oh, one more came in. Great.
Not a question, but a high five. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So we appreciate it, and hopefully you found value in it. And this has been a long goodbye, but thank you again for attending. And we'll be in touch next month with our next topic. Thank you.